days before that.
All right, here we go. At this time, we'll go ahead and call this workshop to order. Val, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Penny?
Here.
Commissioner Curry?
Here.
Commissioner Danio?
Here.
Commissioner Johnson? Here. Mayor Villa?
Here. And at this time, I'd ask you all to please rise for a short invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I'm not responsible for that one, am I?
No.
Oh, okay.
Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today to ask for your blessings upon this city and upon this commission as we make decisions to move this city forward. Dear Lord, be with all of our first responders, all of our first line workers, dear God. Please cure us of this COVID virus and allow us to continue to forge on. In Jesus' heavenly name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I could win
Yeah,
that. Here's one.
it's just a practice run later. All right, so we're here to meet to talk about the stormwater projects that we've discussed previously, and Mr. Forte and I got to meet with Antoine, Mr. Curry, to go over some things and found pretty interesting, and so I look forward to this meeting. I don't know, Joe, if you want to just kick it off or if you want to bring Antoine right up.
Well, Antoine's going to come up and he'll kind of lead you into what we're going to talk about tonight.
All right, take it away, Antoine.
Good evening. Antoine Khoury, Public Works. The plan today is to refresh your memories on the Stormwater System Master Plan that was done in 2015. Give you a brief summary of what the findings were. And hopefully by the end of that presentation, answering any questions you have. We have a couple of recommendations for 2 projects to move forward. We'll discuss as we go along. With that, I'll turn it over to Andrew with Mead and Hunt to do the presentation.
All right.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good to see you all again. Andrew Giannini with Mead and Hunt. So back when we did the report, it was Quentin L. Hampton Associates, and so now we just changed the firm name underneath, and this is what was delivered to the city back in February 2015.
You didn't charge us again, did you, Andrew?
Excuse me?
You didn't charge us again, did you?
No. Excuse me.
You need some water, Andrew?
Would you like some water?
Actually,
Sometimes when you get that crick in your throat, you can't get it out.
Got pepperoni pizza there too, in case.
No.
God.
Oh, God, no.
okay, so the Stormwater Master Plan was basically an update from previous master plans, and here's the scope basically of what we did. We identified flooding areas and places there was problem areas. We also looked at water quality data. We prepared a stormwater model of the existing system. Then we, looked at regulations and kind of spouted out some of those regulations and maintenance opportunities, some of the pollutant sources in the city, and then we did some conceptualizing of some proposed improvements. We did some planning level cost estimates for those projects, and basically brought that to the attention, and then we gave you some ideas of how you could fund some of the construction of those projects with either, SRF loans or there's also lots of grants out there to provide that. And then we gave you an implementation schedule at the end. So this is basically the city limits, and we broke it down into several basins. You can see the purple line are the basins that we broke the city down into, and each of those basins, flows to one of the tributaries of LPGA Canal. Basically, the whole city pretty much drains to the river, most of it through the LPGA Canal, and so there are some areas where it runs, from east of Ridgewood, it runs directly into the river. But the purple basins, we broke those down to make it manageable when we modeled the system. So you got a really nice model out of this master plan, and you can use those for future projects, even if you don't do some of the projects we have in here. So. Just a little history. We thought this was interesting. Back in the 20s, when they dug the Halifax drainage canal system, that system goes from Ormond Beach all the way to Port Orange. There's three main outfalls. There's the LPJ Canal, there's the Reed Canal, there's the Halifax Canal. And then there's some, Daytona Beach has some minor piping outfalls that go from some of their areas out to the river. But and
Where's
some
the
of
Halifax Canal?
it's the one that runs, when it turns off of Nova Road and it goes east along what's that street? It's the just past Herbert, just south of Herbert Street. There's a
Port Orange?
canal takes an east.
So it's Port Orange?
Yeah, in Port Orange, and then it runs under Dunlawton after it goes around the post office,
Okay.
and then it goes out into Rose Bay actually. So that's part of that whole system. And we found this document which was dug up. It was part of Quentin L. Hampton's study way back in the 60s. And he came up with an actual project for the LPJ Canal. I'll get into that in a bit. But in this document, it tells that the whole system was designed for like a 5 inches and 24-hour event, okay? Which is actually a mean annual event. That's like, we should get that every year, right? 5 inches and 24 hours. So it tells you that it was severely undersized to drain, because it was all they were doing is trying to get the water off the land. It's like try to make the land more usable. But it was never intended to drain all that land, for, level of service for what we're using it for now, okay? So we started out in a bad position, it never got improved, and it's still basically what it was back then. So, next slide. This is some of the results from our modeling. CDM Smith did the model for the entire Nova Canal watershed. They used a different model than we used. They used a SWIM model, but they analyzed all the way from Ormond to Port Orange, and that was when they had, when we had that huge flooding problem, and the county got involved and got all the cities together, and CDM Smith did a bunch of modeling. Well, we just did the city of Holly Hill and basically broke it down, and here we're comparing the results from their model and our model, and it's comparative. The outfall, which is to the left, we were pretty close, and then as you go west to the right, that's your basically your nodes along LPJ Canal. And so we were right in there. We were within reason of their results, okay? And this is for a 25-year event, which is about 9 inches in 24 hours, okay? Next slide. So here's a list of the projects that we came up with and the implementation schedule. So we looked at out to 10 years or so. And some of the, immediate needs back when we did the report were, flooding, of course. And one of the biggest projects that we have on there, the costliest, is that LPGA pump station with a backflow gate on there. Because the main reason you all flood is you get that high tide and it's raining and you can't get the water out into the river. So it builds up in the low areas, which is just east or west of US 1, where you have seen a lot of flooding there. So also, along the river, of course, your riverside has a problem. But those are some of the projects we have. We have number 3, 4, or 5, there's some other pump station projects that we looked at because you do have an issue with along US 1, like 2nd Street, 3rd Street, where the water can't get out. There's a low area there, and it's all tidally influenced. So the only way to solve that is to, when you have a high tide, is to pump against that high tide. And then there's others as far as water quality items, such as the Bishop's Farms detention pond, the Mirage detention pond. Those are more water quality projects. And the exfiltration trench projects are more water quality. So you'll see that those with the pumps are for flooding, and the exfiltration in the ponds are for the water quality. Because what the St. John's River Water Management District will require is that if you try to increase discharge into the river, they're going to want to see you offset some of those pollutant loads going into the river. So you have to show them that you're trying to balance, over a long term, that you are collecting those like daily rainfall events into a detention area or some kind of treatment system, and you're removing those pollutants over the year, and then they'll allow you to install these pump stations for extreme events, for operation in extreme events. So you can see that we came up with quite a list there. So and a lot of people, when they saw that, it was like it's like a sticker shock, of course. But it's something you can look at on a yearly basis, or over 5-10 years, and try to whittle away at them. So next slide. And these are the locations, some of those projects. They're throughout the city. We've got some in the west side of the city where we've identified some vacant lands that you could purchase for retention ponds, and then there's a lot of the exfiltration trench projects we've located along the ridge, Daytona Avenue and all, where it's high and sandy.
Andrew,
Yes.
you just said retention pond. What's the difference between a retention pond and a detention pond on the previous screen?
Okay, yeah, that's it. Well, when a retention pond is when you have enough volume in that pond to retain everything that flows to it. So they're mostly detention ponds because they're only detaining the water
It has a pop
for a
up?
short period. You're right, and it's got a control structure allows it to discharge. So everything's mostly detention. So I misspoke. It's mostly detention.
Okay, thank you. I just need to clear that up.
Okay.
Thanks.
So, and there are some systems where they do like an offline retention pond. So they'll retain a certain volume, and then the rest goes out. So that pond will be like a first pond and then a second pond. So
I think as a layman, I've always called them all retention ponds.
right, yeah.
So have I.
You're wrong.
I'm wrong.
So, anyways, any questions on locations of the projects at all? So, next slide, Howie. So here's just a few. Here's the LPGA Canal Pump Station, which we conceptualized to go right behind the City Hall here. And this is the property the city owns, actually, right behind the Civic Center. And I forgot the name of that building.
Seeker Hall.
Zika Hall, that's right, okay. So it's actually, the property is available for this station, and it's a 3 pump at 75,000 GPM each. And you got a tide gate, like I spoke about. It's when you get the storm, what you do is you put that tide gate down to prevent the tide from coming in, and you can start pumping that canal system down, and you can free up volume before the storm comes. And you can get, you can basically pump that whole system down to where the canal is fairly, maybe a foot of water in the canal system. And then you're ready for the storm, and then during the storm you would do, as the level rises, you would pump and try to keep up with the storm runoff while keeping that tide gate closed.
The county shot us down on that one.
with they did shut us down?
Yeah, we went out to the county and met with their engineers, and they said that, I was trying to get them to partner with us on it, and they said that in their report, it's not going to, it'll do what you're saying, it'll reduce the volume, but it's not going to save any homes from being flooded. So they weren't going to put any money into it.
Yeah, and it's all about how you operate it, I think. And it's got its limits, of course. It's probably good up to like a 25-year event, but anything above that, say a 100-year event, you're gonna have flooding, the same flooding.
No matter what,
'Cause
right.
And one of the limiting factors is, like I was saying before, is the canal cross-section, okay? I could put a bigger pump here, but the canal cross-section, there's only so much you can pull through that canal cross-section. So the only thing you could, you really can't do anything unless you widen that cross-section. I mean, and that would take, rebuilding LPGA Boulevard. You'd have to put a huge box culvert section underneath, if you ever widen LPGA, which would help tremendously. So, yeah, that is true. You still have you're going to still have your 100-year, but this will help you recover from any storm. Remember the water sat here for days on end? This would help you recover within a day, those floodwaters. Help the people get back.
Yeah, so in other words, if this is a project that the city wanted to do, we're on our own. It's a county canal. It serves an area well beyond Holly Hill, Ormond, Daytona, unincorporated, and the county
Yeah,
would,
we gotta foot the bill.
it would be all ours. Yeah.
I will say that there's a lot of grant money out there, and it would take an effort, but Ormond Beach has been successful in getting a huge grant for the pump station we're building or designed for them for the Central Park Lakes. And they showed that we'd be able to save, quite a few of the structures there with, and they're doing basically the same thing, except they're having to run a force main from Central Park Lakes to the river, which is about a mile. So they're running, we've designed a 36-inch force main out of the pump station to the river. And we've shown that we're lowering the stages by about 1.5 feet. For a 100-year event.
Was that through the state legislature that they got that funding, or was it,
It was
through?
through FEMA,
I was through FEMA.
the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program.
How much does that cover on that? What's the match?
I want to say it was about 2/3 of the cost.
Wow, that the state covered.
We put in for HMGP grants all the time. Steve does, and we'll get into it a little bit later. We had gotten an HMGP grant for the duckbills, but then the duckbills came back at a significantly
overpriced.
higher cost than what we had estimated.
No, you want to go to the next slide? Here's some of the other pump stations we identified for the areas like 2nd Street and up by Granada Street. And so the idea is to put this pump station on the end of the culvert. As the culvert comes in to where the river is, you can pull that water into this pump station and put a like a duckbill or a backflow preventer to prevent the tide from coming in and pump into the river, and so you're overcoming that tidal effect that backs up water into like US 1 on 2nd and 3rd Street. So
Unless the river comes over the banks.
right.
Which is what happened.
That's what happens by my house. It comes over the banks.
Yep. Yeah, and there you're looking at possibly, backflow preventers farther inland. So like just to the west of Riverside Drive or
Daytona Avenue.
yeah, Daytona. That would help prevent that water from going back to US 1. Okay. Next slide. And okay, there's another project where we looked at, because the canal system is so limited for the outfall for LPGA, we looked at other outfall systems, and these are two projects that we looked at. And one is connecting there at, I think it's Cala Grande. No, Walker Street, and then there's also one at 8th Street. So we looked at connecting the canal, the northeast canal, connecting that and running, pretty good sized culvert out to the river to try to get that water out, because that water comes from Cala Grande all the way south to the LPGA canal. It's a long run. So, and if you could get that water out before you got to the LPGA, it would help unload the LPGA system somewhat, and then you could get that water out to the river quicker. So that's a couple other projects we looked at. Next. And these are the treatment projects where we have identified some properties, like I say, for ponds, that we could, do some localized flood attenuation and also treatment. And one of them is the Mirage there on the left. I think that's Project 9, which the city partnered to get that constructed. So that's one of the projects that Antoine will talk about later. Next slide. And we're back to the implementation schedule. So you've seen that. So I think that's the last slide. Nope, we're talking about the funding. So we talked about in the report about the state revolving loan funds and the numerous grant opportunities available for water resource. You can also generate some income when increasing utility rates. And we're here to help if you want to proceed with any other projects on that. Yes, sir.
Is there any, and I don't know if I'm asking for something that's impossible. So we showed a lot of bird's eye views of the city. Is there any way to visualize in red or blue a 10-year event where that water goes, a 25-year event where the water goes, and then overlay that with these mitigations to say, okay, you're going to have 2 square miles of flooding in a 100-year event, but if we put that one thing at LPGA, now you're going to have 1.7 square miles. Mm-hmm. Is that doable?
Yeah, we could do that. Yeah,
without spending a boatload of money. I mean, do we have the data that could?
So there's been a significant change in the modeling that we use. We use this called ICPR, interconnected pond recovery. Interconnected pond. ICPR is the acronym. I can't remember.
My only concern
anyways,
is
so they have that. If we imported the data into that, we might be able to show that level.
My concern is that, okay, we have a $28 million list here that's 6 years old, that's now $40 million.
Right.
And we say go today, and it gets constructed in 5 years. So now we're at $50 million. Right. And we saved 100 square yards of flooding.
Right.
At some point, you're at a point of, what's your rate of return? That's what I'm going at.
Diminishing return.
Yeah, I mean, so you could, just because you spend $50 million doesn't mean places aren't going to flood in a 25 or 100-year event.
Right.
There's just not enough volume to move that water. So that's my concern is that, I mean, it's great, but what are we going to get for $50 million? Because that's what it's really going to be.
Right. Yeah. There are, I mean, and there would be such a number of iterations, depending on which projects. So say if we took the immediate projects, we could possibly model those all as one and see what kind of reductions we got. And
Right, and if it wasn't too much trouble, you might say the Ridge Avenue one is $747,000, but that gets you a better rate of return than spending $7.6 million on the top project.
Right.
But I don't.
Yeah, like some of those are exfiltration designs, so they're really not going to solve any flooding.
Right.
They're gonna capture your pollutants and
Right,
take them out before you go.
but maybe project 2 is a better rate of return. The 533 is maybe a better rate of return than the 7.6.
Right.
I don't know. That's how my brain works.
Yeah, I understand. You're a visual person.
Right.
You want to see that
The numbers don't mean anything to me. I gotta see.
You want to see that
Yeah,
flooding
what's it gonna,
area,
is
sure.
it, I wanna see that thing get small.
Yeah, yeah, no, I think, yeah, with this new software, I think there's an ability to do that, you know, it might take a little work, but, we'd have to. we'll have to see,
You got some
we'd have to-
interns over there, don't you?
What's that?
Some interns you gotta put to work, right?
And that's what they do. They do a very good job.
Yeah. Are there any more questions for Andrew from the commission? We may call you back up here.
No problem.
Thank you very much for
stay
that.
around.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Antoine, if you could come back up. Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Forte, do you want to kick it off on some of the things that we all talked about, looking at the projects and
Well, the reason we're
understanding
doing
that?
this is, we do have funds in the stormwater account, and it's just a matter of prioritizing what we want to spend the money on to, as what Commissioner Penny was alluding to, have the highest results for the money that we spend. There's no sense in spending $3 or $4 million on a project that's going to reduce your flooding problem by a half inch when there's 8 inches of water. It's not going to make a difference. So Antoine and I talked about another option of pursuing is duck bills on all of the outfalls. Now, keep in mind, like Andrew said, all of our outfalls that go into the river handle primarily the water that comes from Ridgewood Avenue east. Everything that's west of Ridgewood Avenue goes through the northeast, southeast, northwest, southeast canals into LPGA. Some of them still get their way past the railroad tracks and out to the river, but the majority of that ends up in the LPGA canal. So, we think that, the duckbill system, if it prevents the surge of the water coming into our system, at least we'll have that capacity to hold the localized water until the tide goes out, and then it would release the water. And you've seen when we have a high tide, that LPGA canal comes up to the railroad trestle.
The
So
manhole covers are gurgling up. I mean, the water.
that's the pushback from the tide, and
Yeah.
you see that down at 5th Street, at 3rd Street, at 2nd Street.
Yeah.
And you literally see it pushing almost 2 feet or more out of those manholes from the tide coming in. It's the tide coming in and the pressure of the water coming down the ridge from Ridgewood Avenue, and it meets at that point and it comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people just don't understand that we can't stop that surge from coming in. And, there are times when that tide is high and it's raining, and you'll see the water coming over the sidewalk from around, just around 5th Street, even north of 5th Street, sometimes by 7th
Comes up to
Street.
my corner.
It'll start coming over the sidewalk into the road. And unless you build, like they have in Tampa, you build a solid wall down the length of the city, good luck with that. It's just not going to happen. So really what we want to find out today is, what does the commission want us to make the priorities to address some of this flooding?
Well, and I'll just say, in our discussions, we talked about some of the water quality things, and those are nice projects if you're a community that can deal with those. I don't believe our focus right now is on water quality so much as exactly what you said. Bang for our buck is trying to reduce the amount of time the flood waters are going to be there, because they're going to be there in a major event, and how to most effectively spend that money to get that out, knowing that we could throw $50 million at this and maybe not make a big difference at all. But, and Mr. Kerr, I'd like you to touch on a couple of things, that small projects that we could bite off and that would essentially help in those respects. And one of them, I think Mr. Forte brought up, which was the duck bills.
Right. The next one I had in mind, or we analyzed, is Mirage. We can have a couple of projects or 2 outfalls that goes into that pond. That pond has capacity, so we don't have to worry about the capacity. But it addresses 2 locations of localized flooding. That's one is on Flomish, and the other one, what's the other one?
Is it Timber Trail?
Timber Trail.
Timber Trail.
Sorry, what?
Timber Trail.
Timber Trail.
Timber Trail, yes. And that elevates all of that localized flooding. And the outfalls, I think it's the next best thing for us to identify which location is the best to apply these duckbills. As you can see on the map, everything drains to the river, like Andrew said. Everything goes there. So if we can stop the tide from coming back up, at least give us more capacity to get some water into the system, and then when the tide goes down, we can discharge it. That's what Joe was saying. I'm repeating the same thing. But those are the two projects I think we can move forward. And the nice thing about the Mirage, and we can talk to the developer at that time, maybe we'll build part of the system while they're developing, so they don't have to do at the same time, so we don't have to come back and do some of that stuff. So,
Yeah, I'd like to see if we could provide the material, and while they're doing the site work, that they'll install it for us. Yeah, because otherwise, if they don't, we'd have to go back and tear it all up in the future.
That's the
So-
point. Try to get it before, because we have to get an easement from them for some pipes that we're going to lay down
Right.
in back of lots.
And let me just touch on something really quick, which was in the long-term plan. I don't see any now of the detention ponds working out, and the reasons are Bishop's Farm, it's not going to be a big pond there. It can be commercial. And the Fern, we already decided against that one.
And yeah, the farm on Sixth Street was one of them, and that's,
Farm on Sixth Street, not going to do anything, and then the Mirage has already been built now, so we can cross those off the list right away. And those were some of the big ticket items as well, along with the water quality type exfiltration systems. So that takes off a lot of things on those lists, and I think our money is much better spent on smaller, more localized projects that we use our stormwater funds for. I will say, hearing today about the LPGA pumps, I know we can't burden that cost, and that's honestly, we're kind of priced out of that. If it's $7 million of 2015 money, maybe $15 million today. But if there was a way to get funding for a vast majority of it some other way, through the state or through FEMA, I wouldn't be closed-minded off to it if we could have some help with it, if it was shown to help, like Andrew was saying. So before, I kind of had that crossed off my list after our discussion, but I'm open-minded if we can get funding for it. But once again, that's the hardest part of the whole equation. So, and there's going to be less and less funding now with everything that's happening, and state funds are down and federal funds, obviously. So I don't know if anyone, Vice Mayor?
Joe, we're talking, duck bills are back on the forefront. We had the grant. We didn't take the grant because it was a lot more than we thought. Any possibility of reapplying for that grant and taking whatever money they give us?
Actually, we did.
yeah, Steve reapplies for that.
Reapply.
Okay.
And it's a little bit competitive. The HMGP grant is monies that come in through FEMA, and it goes through this HMGP board that Steve is on, and they vote on projects. So you have to be able to have competitive projects that the board is going to support. And we got the support the last time, but the funding, what we had anticipated versus what the actual cost was way off.
Wow.
I mean, if we're deciding we're going to do it, anything they give us is better than nothing
Right.
at this point.
Right.
That's the point. If we have the design ready.
Right.
If we don't get it this year, we get it next year. That's the hope. We can, and we don't have to do all of them. That's part of the assignment I was talking to Andrew about, is tell me what's the best
Where's the
bang.
lowest areas? The south end of town, I
South
think is
end.
the lowest.
South end is the lowest. We have identified 13 outfalls that we think is good, are the best bang for the buck. But I'll ask Andrew to model some of that stuff, so make sure that that's the best way to spend the money on the construction. So,
And I agree with you, Mr. Mayor. Some of these smaller projects, the duck bills, it's might not make a huge difference, but if you're driving down the road and you don't see water gushing out of the storm drain anymore,
Right.
Oh, they're doing something about that. We can't stop a 100-year event, but we can slow down a 10 or a 25-year.
We've all seen that. The water coming straight up. It's like a pump
Yeah,
blowing.
it's like, where's that water coming from?
Yeah.
And just to give you a concept of time, I met with, this is back in January of 2016, Marianne Connors, George Rechtenwald, John Angiuli, Judy Grimm. It was Andrew and Mark Giuliano. We went out to the county to ask them if they would support us in this LPGA project, and they came back and said, "You're not going to save any you're not going to stop any water from going into homes with that project, so they're not going to do anything." Now, will it do what Andrew said and free up water to get in there? Here's the other thing you have to remember. We don't have a lot of repetitive flood loss homes. To my knowledge, I think we've had 7 homes that had repetitive flood loss claims historically. So it's not like, if you remember Rio Way up by Cal Grande, that whole
Yep.
neighborhood
They had to
went
buy all
underwater.
that.
They were 5 feet under. That was many, many homes in there. So we don't have a lot of, when we have flooding in the best possible scenario. It's in the street. It's not in people's homes. And when, you look at flooding, and I sometimes when people call and complain, I refer to them to, you go to the Midwest and you watch people that are standing on their roofs.
Yeah.
That's flooding. We have localized flooding in our roads. It may be impassable,
It's an inconvenience, not a disaster.
and it doesn't last, with the exception of a significant rainfall, it doesn't last more than a day, and in fact, it really doesn't last longer than the tide goes out.
Yeah.
And the chief can
Few
probably
hours.
confirm that. Sometimes it lasts a day or two, but for the most part, the tide goes out, the water goes away. So our flooding problem is in the best place. It's in the road.
Never heard it put like that. It's not a bad thought. Yeah.
If our roads were higher, the flooding
Yeah.
would be in the homes, and that would be a problem.
Right.
I think you could control, if you can control the flooding when it has a high tide with those duckbills, I think that'll solve enough of the problem where there wouldn't really be a serious problem.
Well, I don't know if there's modeling that would show us exactly how much that would reduce the flooding. It would certainly help. How much, I don't know, but it also shows the public,
When we have the high tide, right?
but yeah,
So if we can correct that problem when we have the high tide.
right,
The tide goes down, then the flooding will go down.
right. But it shows the community we're making efforts to try to address it.
You're doing something instead of doing nothing.
Right.
One-way check valve.
Look at Andrew with some of those interns with highlights.
Check valves at the duck bill.
Put a big check valve at the inlet down just so that ocean water can't come in on high tide.
Well, you can do that down at Ponce. It's one big check valve.
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Curry?
No, that's just, we're recommending those 2 projects to move forward, just at least for the design, and hopefully we can get some funding for the duck bills and the Mirage Pond. We'll address it at that time, so.
I agree. Is there any other comments or questions from the commission?
You have to go along with the recommendations of our experts.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Do you have anything you wanted to add, Andrew?
Actually, I did.
Okay.
No, and it's caution with the duckbills, if I may, because, you can stop the tide up to a point, like John was saying. Once it gets over the seawall, those duckbills are no longer valid. I mean,
Right.
it's flowing, bypassing those duckbills. So you got to keep that in mind when and if you guys install them. You'll have an event where it's going to come over the seawall. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, John talked about that if we're at that point where it's coming over the seawalls, we could spend $50 million in pumps, and it's not going to make too much more of a difference anyways.
Where are you gonna pump it to if it's coming over the wall?
West.
Where are you gonna pump it to?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, you
Could.
I mean, the
Margarita
rivers.
Yes.
A pump will add an infinitesimal rise to your river level because the river's, the river's a huge surface area. So, I mean, you will make it a rise, but it'll be infinitesimal. But you would move that water from uplands
That wall-
to the
if
river.
that water's coming over the wall of the river, and you have all the pumps in the world, where are you gonna pump water to except back into the river?
You can't. It just
Which
circulates.
is over.
Circling it back, run it back. down.
Just cycle.
First rule of being a plumber.
All right. Thank you so much, though, Andrew, for going back over this. I know it's taken some time, and we really do appreciate that. And it's tough to go over something 6 years old and remember all the details. So you did very well. Thank you. With that, are there any further comments about stormwater before we move on? Mr. Forte, do you have anything else about stormwater?
Not on stormwater.
Okay. We still have some time here. We got 15 minutes, so do we have some other items we could?
I sent each of you a bullet point of my ideas regarding the YMCA. And I got feedback, a little bit of feedback from some of you, but I wanted to run down these things for you to say, do that, don't do that. But I think I need to open up that negotiations with the YMCA again because the contract expires in September. So if you go back to the original agreement in 2010, the YMCA was supposed to pay the city $1,000 a month plus 5% of any annual excess revenue that they received. The Y was supposed to pay all the utility bills. Residents were supposed to get 50% off the regular YMCA membership rate, and we had a Holly Hill Youth Advisory Council in place. Then a year later, in 2011, it changed, and the YMCA stopped paying rent. They don't give us any excess revenue monies. The city pays all the utilities, and the city contributes $45,000 a year in quarterly payments to the Y, and there have been changes in membership fees. So when I was reviewing these contracts, I kind of came up with some things that I thought would be certainly weighted heavily on the city's favor. I would be looking at a 3-year agreement. We would increase our payments to the YMCA from $45,000 to $65,000, and I'll get to that in a minute. And the reason for that money is that it would be paid to the Y specifically to hire a program coordinator for the facility, not a staff person that's going to sit there and do another job, but somebody that's paid full-time to run programs at that facility. The Y would pay all the utilities, and the utilities are about $30,000 a year, so the $20,000 I wanted to add is offset by the $30,000 that they would pay in utilities. I'd want to have 3 members representing the city of Holly Hill on the corporate board, and I'm sure I'm going to get pushback from that. But we have no one that represents Holly Hill on the corporate board. Commissioner Penny used to be on there. He no longer is. We found out that there's a conflict of interest in a commissioner serving on the board when the city's paying funds to that organization. I also think we need to have a local board made up of 5 to 7 members, like other YMCA members, YMCA clubs have.
Every other YMCA branch in Volusia County.
All the other ones do. So we don't have one. And I tried to do one years ago, and a couple of people served on it, and it fell apart because they don't give us the attention that I think we deserve. I want to have the right to inspect the facility either monthly or quarterly to determine the maintenance needs. I think we should have a separate accounting of all revenues and expenditures specifically for this facility. Now, I don't know how they run their books, but in an ideal world, you'd have all your different business units that roll up into the corporate. And I don't know if they do that. You know, each one of these units should stand alone. And that's how we would determine if this facility is profitable or not. Because what's really happening when you put pen to paper is we're supplementing this system by about $80,000 a year. And if they're making a profit, that profit is then going to the system, and other facilities are using our taxpayers' money for that. And that's not right. It's no different than a city charging out-of-city rates for people to play in their organizations. I think we have to have an agreed-upon number of programs that they offer. If there's 8 spin classes at the Orman Y, we should have more than 1. And if you have to relocate your spin instructors down here and move your people down here, then so be it. But you've got to bring life back into this facility. I'd like to see if we can get the pool open for 9 months out of the year, closing on maybe December, January, and February, maybe March, we'll see. But we've got to try to get that pool open more. We've had members that have literally raised money to pay to have that pool open. We have Bill Gallagher with SolarFit is willing to put a solar system on the roof of the YMCA at no cost. I mean, that's not going to get us year-round swim, but it'll get us a couple of more months. But the challenge with that is, you know, they say, who's going to pay for the lifeguards? Well, that shouldn't be my problem, especially if there's people interested in it. You know, the city will do a better job maintaining the exterior lawn and the landscaping. I'd like to see if we can't come up with some kind of a match where, well, we could do a match for signage that they're looking for. They would qualify for a CRA grant where they would get a sign that they could put out on Ridgewood Avenue to make people know that there's a YMCA back there. And the other thing is they're anticipating getting funds from Halifax Hospital that I think between, you know, if we were going to put money into the facility, if the Martins took it over, we should do something similar if the Y keeps it. And that could be something as simple as, you know, everybody chips in $50,000. The city, the YMCA, Halifax Hospital, and we do some general basic improvements of the building and just try to get it to spruce up. So
Joe, when ECHO comes back, would that be a ECHO-eligible project?
ECHO doesn't do maintenance projects. They do new capital projects.
Okay.
So I don't think it would. So those are some of my thoughts, and if you have any feedback on that, I already redlined the agreement with all of these changes that I'd like to send off to Chris Hillcop and get his thoughts on it. I know that he's anticipating money coming from the PPP. If the money comes in from the PPP, Halifax will give their contribution. My concern, if the money doesn't come in from the PPP, you're going to see a vacant building over there in about a year.
Yeah, well, and we discussed this at length, and I believe that all those changes are not only fair, but also positions the city of Holly Hill of where we need to actually be with that facility, especially that we're using taxpayers' money. And, you know, we've essentially had the same deal for several years now, and it seems like a lopsided deal at this point. So all of those changes that you proposed, I agree with you moving them forward in a discussion to see,
I'm not saying
you know,
we're
what we
going to
can
get
get.
them all.
Right. But if we can get a lot of them, then that'll move us in the right direction. So does anybody have any input on any particular item on that or questions? And if you do, go over them later and get with Joe, and we can always bring it back up at another commission meeting during our commission comment. So Joe, I believe you have consensus now without objection to move forward with talking to Chris Sokop about that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is there anything else?
That's it for the workshop.
All right. So we have about 10 minutes, and 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 we have about 10